The gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized for 1 hour.
Mr. Speaker, for the purpose of debate only, I yield the customary 30 minutes to my good friend, the gentlelady from New York, Ms. Slaughter, pending which I yield myself such time as I may consume.
Without objection, the gentleman from Oklahoma is recognized.
During consideration of this resolution, all time yielded is for the purposes of debate only. Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks.
Without objection.
Mr. Speaker, yesterday the Rules Committee met and reported a rule for consideration of H.R. 1314, the Bipartisan Budget Agreement of 2015. The rule makes an order of motion offered by the Majority Leader that the House concur in the Senate amendment to H.R. 1314 with an amendment consisting of the text of the Bipartisan Budget Agreement of 2015. The rule provides for 1 hour of debate, equally divided and controlled by the Majority Leader and the Minority Leader. Mr. Speaker, I want to start with a phrase I often share with my fellow members. In a negotiation, you're always going to get less than you want and give up more than you'd like. I think that's a fitting way to describe the bill we find ourselves presented with today. In an era of divided government, that's the reality we find ourselves in. At the beginning of the negotiation, the President demanded a clean debt ceiling increase with no changes and no conditions. In addition, he wanted more spending and higher taxes. Given that, I think the deal that we have before us is a testament to our leadership's ability to negotiate. As I said yesterday, Mr. Speaker, nobody's going to be popping champagne corks at either end of Pennsylvania Avenue over this bill. It is what most things are in divided government, in a system of checks and balances, and in an era of polarized politics. It is a deal that leaves both sides unsatisfied. But it is a deal that avoids default, prevents a government shutdown, and adequately funds our military. Moreover, it reforms and funds the Social Security Disability Insurance Fund, saving it from bankruptcy, and prevents a crippling increase in the premiums paid by many people who receive Medicare Part B. There are any number of provisions that members on both sides can point to as reasons to oppose this legislation. I myself would have negotiated a different deal. But in determining one's support for this legislation, I encourage members to look at what the alternative would be. And that is this: the first default on our nation's debt in the history of this country, significant cuts to our military in a time when we need our military the most, an almost 50% increase in Medicare premiums for many of our seniors. That's the reality of what happens if we do nothing. Mr. Speaker, I'm encouraged by a number of provisions in this legislation. First, just like the Bipartisan Budget Act of 2013, this legislation sets forth 2 years of budget certainty for the Appropriations Committee. That certainty puts us on a path to ensure consideration of full-year spending bills for the next 2 years, just as we were able to accomplish this past fiscal year. In addition, this budget certainty provides the needed investment for our military. With the ongoing conflicts across the Middle East, Russian activity in Eastern Europe, and Chinese claims in the South China Sea, it's clearer now than ever that America needs a robust military. And Mr. Speaker, most importantly, all these discretionary spending increases are fully paid for by offsets and mandatory programs. In addition to these critical investments, the legislation before us makes a number of common-sense structural reforms to SSDI, like requiring a medical review before awarding benefits and expanding cooperative disability investigation units to investigate sophisticated fraud schemes before benefits are awarded. These reforms both ensure that the Disability Trust Fund will be able to pay full benefits and ensure that those who truly are disabled have access to this important problem. Beyond that, Mr. Speaker, this legislation realizes over $30 billion in Medicare savings within the budget window and countless billions in years to come. I'm pleased to again be talking about the real drivers of our debt, the 2/3 of our government spending that is on autopilot. If we are unable to deal with these mandatory programs, they will end up bankrupting us. Finally, Mr. Speaker, this legislation suspends the debt ceiling through March 15th of 2017. Since its inception in 1917, 20 debt limit laws also included a change in fiscal policy. I'm pleased that this debt limit increase is yet again accompanied by mandatory reforms. Of course, Mr. Speaker, I would have preferred stronger reforms, but in this era of divided government with a Democratic president and a Republican Congress, no one will be able to get everything they want. The president wanted a clean debt limit increase. Congress wanted significant entitlement reforms. What we are left with is a compromise which lowers the trajectory of our debt, but also assures the world that the United States will pay its bills. While not a perfect piece of legislation, I believe this moves us in the right direction and funds critical priorities for our nation. I urge the support for the rule and the underlying legislation, and with that, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Oklahoma reserves the balance of his time.